Order, order. Dr. Roz Savage to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship and a real privilege to bring this very important debate today on behalf of the Petitions Committee. I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition number 729440 relating to play in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. Before I turn to the detail, I'd like to set out 3 key points that really frame this debate. First of all, England is now the outlier within the United Kingdom. It's the only nation with no statutory expectation that play-based learning continues beyond the age of 5. Scotland and Wales already have legal frameworks and national strategies that embed and protect play into the early primary years. It's only in England that the statutory requirement for learning through play effectively stops at the end of reception, creating a cliff edge between reception and year 1. Nobody's brains, let alone 4 or 5-year-old children's brains, respond well to cliff edges. This approach runs counter to everything we know about children's developmental needs and the evidence of how young children learn. The second key point is that play-based learning is not the same as enrichment. Enrichment usually means activities that sit alongside the core curriculum, such as clubs, sport, music, trips, or recreational time. These activities are valuable, but they are by definition additional. Play-based learning is something quite different. It's a structured, evidence-based way of teaching the core curriculum itself. The government's response to this petition appears to misunderstand that distinction and thereby misses the point. And thirdly, we must distinguish between 2 different but equally vital kinds of play. There is purposeful, guided play within the classroom as a core teaching method, and free, social, physical play in playgrounds and outdoor spaces. I happen to live next door to a primary school and can vouch for the fact that the latter is a great deal noisier than the former, but it's a joyous and a happy noise, in fact the sound of childhood. Both kinds of play are essential, and both are currently being squeezed to the detriment of our children.
Would the honourable member give way?
I will give way.
I thank you for giving way, and my apologies. In my constituency of Horsham, we can already see the positives that play-based education can bring with organisations such as Woods for Learning, which is a forest school catering for special educational needs and indeed other children. So the effectiveness is clear enough. So would the honourable member agree that the time has come to look at bringing this approach into the classroom too?
I thank my honourable colleague for his intervention, and Woods for Learning sounds marvellous. We know that time spent in nature punches above its weight in terms of psychological and physical benefits for children, so I absolutely do agree. I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for highlighting the importance of access to play. Something many children and parents have raised with me in Hastings and Rye is how many playgrounds have closed or have fallen into disrepair in my constituency. I've done an audit of all of the playgrounds and found that 8 playgrounds have closed since 2015 and over half need upgrading. Many of them are run by housing associations who are neglecting their duties to maintain them. So does she agree that we've got to do better? We've got to make sure the playgrounds we've got, often in the most needy parts of our constituencies, are properly maintained and children can enjoy them?
I thank the honourable member for her intervention and absolutely agree with her point. I've also encountered similar challenges in my constituency of the South Cotswolds, where playgrounds are not well maintained, or when developers promise to provide them, they shove them off into a muddy corner of a field entirely inappropriate for children's play. So it's absolutely essential for the sake of our children that we make sure that these safe and enjoyable and not too muddy spaces are provided. Thank you. I'd like to thank the creator of this petition, Ruth Lucui, who is here today with many other people who feel very passionately about this issue. Ruth is a former deputy head teacher and now an education consultant. I would also like to thank the more than 106,000 people who signed this petition, including over 200 from my own South Cotswolds constituency. This scale of support reflects a widespread sense that our education system, as currently structured, is failing too many children. And in the APPG for Play last week, I heard even more from more educational experts on this very point. One experienced school teacher told me bluntly that the present model works well for perhaps 10% of pupils, but not for the majority. Not because teachers lack skill or commitment, they absolutely have that in abundance, but because the system is fundamentally misaligned with how a child's brain works and learns. On a personal note, this debate goes to the heart of why I decided to stand for Parliament. The preamble to the Liberal Democrat Constitution commits us as a party to building a society in which no one is enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity, and in which every single person is empowered to develop their potential to the full. That journey towards fulfilling potential begins in childhood. Play is one of the primary ways in which human potential, creativity and confidence are formed. That's why I was keen to put my hand up to lead this debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee. So let me return to that first key distinction, the difference between enrichment and play-based learning. Enrichment, as I've said, means activities added on around the edges of the school day. Play-based learning, on the other hand, is about how learning itself is designed and delivered. It's a planned, teacher-guided pedagogy in which reading, writing and arithmetic and wider knowledge are learned through exploration, talk, movement, construction, role play and problem solving. Teachers are not stepping back, far from it. They are actively shaping the environment, setting challenges, modelling language, asking probing questions and intentionally extending the children's thinking, while at the same time giving children genuine agency over how they engage in an embodied and creative way. Practitioners give powerful evidence of what this looks like in practice. In one platinum-rated primary school, using a play-first model, the head teacher told me that children must complete all must-do tasks aligned with national expectations, but they get to choose when and how to do them during extended play-based learning sessions. This school has academic standards at or above national averages. Attendance is described as through the roof. The children can't wait to get there in the morning and they're a bit reluctant to leave at the end of the day. Behaviour problems fall and children almost can't wait to participate. Globally, across more than 2,000 schools and 1.8 million children using high-quality play approaches, we see this same pattern emerging. Higher engagement, better attendance, fewer behaviour issues because children are not wired to sit still for hours and hours a day at age 5, and much greater professional satisfaction for teachers who really see their students thriving. This brings me to the second distinction, guided play in classrooms and free play in playgrounds. Guided play in the classroom supports cognitive and language development. Children experience what psychologists call productive struggle. They plan, they manage resources, they seek help when they need it, they collaborate and persist and reflect. They develop independence, motivation and embodied understanding, not simply compliance and conformity. Free play, especially outdoors and in nature, serves a different but equally vital purpose. It's where children develop physical confidence, learn to negotiate rules, to resolve conflict, to take manageable risks, to build friendships and experience a real sense of autonomy. It supports mental health, resilience and social intelligence in ways that no formal lesson, no matter how well designed, can fully replicate.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I will give way.
Thank you very much for giving way. And I've been to see the OPAL programme, Outdoor Play and Learning, at Brookside Primary School in Eastleigh in my constituency. And what she said there was really interesting, because actually what the teachers are finding is, because of the outdoor play element, they are spending more time successfully teaching in the classroom because there are less issues, less disputes to resolve, etc. So would she agree with me that these are things that teachers and schools are pushing for, both indoor and outdoor, because together they ultimately result in better learning for children?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention and wholeheartedly agree. The evidence is incontrovertible on this. This kind of free play benefits students, benefits teachers, and also benefits parents. So these two forms of play are complementary but not interchangeable. A truly child-centred system must value and protect both of them. And neuroscience helps explain why this matters so profoundly. Play activates almost every region of the developing brain, strengthening connections between emotional, social, and cognitive systems. It stimulates dopamine and serotonin, creating what might be called a happy, relaxed, learning-ready brain. These rich, flexible neural networks support memory, creativity, and adaptability. By contrast, chronic stress and over-formalization create rigid neural pathways that inhibit curiosity and learning. They create more stress that is not conducive to a receptive brain. In simple terms, joyful, playful brains learn better. And this isn't just about well-being in the short term. It's about future readiness in the age of artificial intelligence. The skills that will matter most in the future are not rote recall, but creativity, adaptability, collaboration, emotional intelligence, imagination, and the ability to navigate uncertainty. These are precisely the same attributes that high-quality play develops. If we want children to thrive alongside AI rather than be diminished by it, we must nurture the uniquely human capacities that play supports. Yet, as practitioners told me, teacher training in England contains remarkably little on child development, neuroscience, or the pedagogy of play. Many teachers do know how play works, but feel constrained by rigid tests and by inspections that prioritise uniform outcomes and control, rather than curiosity and agency. This contributes not only to poorer outcomes for children, but to burnout, demoralisation, recruitment and retention crisis across the teaching profession. It's also vital to remember that the effects of depriving children are not equally felt. Children in low-income families, or those who have special educational needs and disabilities, are the most likely to experience barriers to play, at the exact same time as being the children most likely to benefit from it. If this government is serious about taking into account the educational needs of each individual child, play must form a vital part of their SEND strategy and curriculum reset. This is why the petitioners are not asking just for warm words today. They're asking for statutory recognition for play-based learning and continuous provision to be embedded in the national framework, and for every single school to have a proper strategic plan for play, just as they have plans for literacy, safeguarding, or special educational needs. So just finally, I'd like to return to those 3 points with which I began. England is still the only country in the home nations with no statutory expectation that play-based learning continues beyond age 5. That's a policy choice, not inevitability. Secondly, play-based learning is not enrichment. It's different. It's a core pedagogical approach grounded in evidence about how young children's brains develop and how deep learning takes place. And guided play in classrooms and free play in playgrounds are not luxuries. Together and in complement to each other, they build the cognitive, emotional, social and creative foundations that children need, not only to pass tests, but to flourish as human beings in a rapidly changing world. So, in conclusion, I hope the Minister will respond directly to what the petitioners are asking for, to recognise play-based learning as core, not peripheral, to address the reception to Year 1 cliff edge, to strengthen teacher training in child development and play, and to ensure that our curriculum and accountability systems give every child the chance to grow into a confident, curious, resilient and creative adult. If we want a generation able to think, collaborate, imagine and thrive in a world shaped by AI, then we must start by taking play seriously. Play is not a distraction from education, but one of its most powerful enablers. And I commend this petition to the House. Thank you.
Question is that this House has considered E-petition 729440 relating to play in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. I call Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Ms Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. And I thank the Honourable Member for South Cotswolds for introducing this debate alongside the 106,082 people who signed the petition, of whom 182 are my constituents in Dulwich and West Norwood. And I pay tribute to the campaigners who are here today for your important work on this topic. There is a huge body of evidence that demonstrates the paramount importance of play in early childhood. As my 2-year-old next door neighbour who visited over the Christmas recess for tea announced as he stepped through our door, "Where are the toys?" Indicating, should any of us have any doubt about the paramount of the experience, the particular experience that he was looking from on his visit and on wherever he goes. I want to pay tribute in particular to the work of PEDAL at the University of Cambridge, the Centre for Play in Education, Development and Learning, a part of the Department for Education in Cambridge, who are dedicated to amassing evidence on the importance of play and developing a huge wealth of resources for practitioners in all aspects of childhood. And they highlight the important role of play in developing relationships and secure attachments for young children, the importance of play in supporting physical and mental health and good development, the importance of play, of course, for learning, and the importance of play for communication and for building good social relationships, which are foundational. I've had the privilege of visiting many early years settings, both in my constituency and across the country, and primary schools as well. And I've seen many brilliant examples of play-led learning. I think in particular of the many schools now that are practising forest school, affording that opportunity for young children to go out into the outdoors and learn from each other and from the natural environment outside of the formal classroom. And I know that the best teachers and the best early years practitioners make play a part of the curriculum and work to make all learning fun. This topic is relevant to a number of aspects of the Select Committee's current and recent work. We are midway through a big inquiry on the early years, looking at the evidence of what makes for good support across all aspects of the early years. We have undertaken some work to scrutinise the curriculum and assessment review, and I'll return to that topic in a moment. And last year we undertook a major piece of work on SEND, focusing on creating inclusive learning environments for all children, and looking at the evidence of the very high number of children who are currently being failed by a system that is not properly geared to meeting their needs. And as part of that piece of work, we identified the transition points in education as an area that needs particular attention as the government considers SEND reform, of which the transition from the early years foundation stage to Key Stage 1 is of course an important transition. And we are undertaking work on child poverty, and I'd highlight that while play is important in education settings, in formal settings, in early childhood, in reducing the attainment gap, access to high-quality play experiences in communities are also vitally important. And I think in my constituency, we are at the absolute eye of the storm of the housing crisis. We have so many families with young children who are not adequately housed, who are living in overcrowded, cramped accommodation. and for those families in particular, being able to access high quality play equipment in their local community close to home is such a vitally important part of their children's development. I want to briefly just pay tribute to a much loved former and much missed former late member of this place, the Right Honourable Frank Dobson, who was passionate about play and who helped to deliver under the previous Labour government a step change in investment in play equipment in our communities, and he continued to correspond with me about this topic until very close to the end of his life. The erosion of council funding that we saw under the Conservative government for 14 years, of course, made it harder for our councils to keep pace with that investment, and we have seen too many examples of play equipment that has fallen behind best practice and fallen into disrepair in recent years. I want to welcome the Curriculum and Assessment Review and its focus on restoring creative subjects to the heart of the curriculum, reducing the burden of assessment. These are important reforms and they are very welcome. The curriculum, of course, is a framework. It does not dictate individual lesson plans and it does not dictate teaching methods. So I hope that as the government continues to develop the guidance around the curriculum reform, there will be creative responses to those reforms which give some prominence to play, particularly in Key Stage 1. I would also just highlight, finally, a recent conversation that I had with, last week, in fact, with the Estonian Education Minister. Estonia, as we know, achieves excellent outcomes from its education system, and it has a system in the early years which focuses almost entirely on the social and emotional development of children in early childhood as the foundation for more formal learning. And what she was saying to me is that, you know, school is tough in Estonia. We expect children to work really hard. We give them a great deal of content, but they do that on a foundation in the early years that means that they are good cooperators and collaborators with their classmates, that they are good at working in teams, and that they are good at managing their own emotions to engage with learning to the fullest extent. We have a government that has an ambitious programme of reform for education. It has a clear commitment to making childhood better across our country and to investing in the services that support children, particularly in the early years. I do hope that as the government continues to bring forward more detailed guidance to support those reforms and moves towards the publication of the school's white paper, which we are expecting shortly, that the work of the petitioners around this topic of play in the Key Stage 1 curriculum will be at the forefront of their thought. I think it is important for children's development. I think it is important for their engagement in education, for discovering a lifelong love of learning, and the evidence to support that view is very strong.
Before I call the next speaker, I'm going to do an informal time limit of 4 minutes because of the popularity of this important debate. If we could help each other out by keeping speeches to 4 minutes, please. Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Ms Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. And I also want to thank the member from South Cotswolds for bringing forward this petition on behalf of the petitioners. Hopefully I won't take 4 minutes because I'm no expert on this topic, but I'm here because 389 of my constituents signed the petition giving South West Devon the 5th highest response rate in the country. And I always feel as members of Parliament, when we get sent that little table telling us how many people signed it, where at all possible, it's great to be able to come and actually represent their views. I've also heard from 2 or 3 parents directly. Now, one of those teachers that has contacted me is Carrie Dyson, and I have to say, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here this afternoon. She is a Key Stage 1 teacher who uses a play-based approach in her classroom, and she told me that this petition is not asking for Key Stage 1 to reduce essential academic content, rather it ensures that core knowledge can be taught using purposeful learning through play, structured enabling environments and skilled adult interaction. Indeed, she was one of those who does not agree with the government response to the petition, and perhaps won't agree with the official opposition's response either, but I want to at least express her views this afternoon. I certainly am very grateful for her expertise and experience. Now, I want to draw attention to one school in my constituency that I had the privilege of visiting towards the end of last year, and that is Sparkwell All Saints Primary Primary. Now, this is a very, very small rural school, so I think the point I want to make around this is often these small rural schools can deliver this programme, but often larger inner city schools might struggle with it. But I just want to put on record how impressed I was with what they provided. They are a school that starts with a Montessori-style nursery and then continues that through into Key Stage 1. And I have to say, if I had children and I lived in that village, I would be absolutely queuing at the door to get my kids into that school. It is absolutely delightful. To visit Mr. Cole, who is the head teacher there, was really inspirational. And it was really clear to see the value of that play-based, hands-on teaching method that nurtured those children from my constituency. However, I understand the arguments for it. I do also want to just touch on the fact that we do need to ensure that any increased emphasis on play doesn't hinder the teaching of a rigorous knowledge-based curriculum, because at the end of the day we are preparing children to go through other key stages. However, as a non-expert in the room, I'm going to just put that out there and say I can absolutely see both sides of this coin. The one thing, though, that I think will come up in the course of this debate, and indeed I think the chair of the Select Committee highlighted it, is often these schools are particularly beneficial for children with additional needs or special educational needs. And I suppose one of the questions I have for the Minister is how do we ensure that where this does take place in local primary schools, that we're creating a fair playing field where you don't end up with a few schools that are delivering this amazing creative environment for these children that might struggle in a more academic mainstream, but then at the other side have an impact on the SEND provision more broadly across the community. So I absolutely recognise the value, but you also have the potential for a school becoming known as being particularly good for SEND children, and then that school ending up with a particularly higher than average cohort of children that fit that criteria. So ultimately, I am completely compelled by what I've heard this afternoon. I can hear all the arguments. I've seen the value of play for myself. I am probably slightly cautiously sceptical, given the role I've played in the past as a school governor in a primary school in a more urban setting that had a more traditional curriculum. However, I do think it's important that we've been able to debate this afternoon. And just two final points, if I may. I was just wondering to ask the Minister, is it the view of the government that a one-size-fits-all is right, or whether it is right to have difference in the school system? And I think that just links to my final point, which is one of the things that this new Labour government has done is want to kind of halt the progression of free schools, which often would have been able to provide this alternative form of education within the state system. And indeed, they're not that keen on multi-academy trusts who perhaps offer a different way of teaching as well. So I'd just be interested to know what the Minister thinks around that one-size-fits-all, or whether there actually should be space in our education system, in our state education system, for different ways of teaching and learning.
Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. And I do congratulate the Petitions Committee for focusing on such an important debate, and also the 216 of my constituents who have made the case through the petition, but also the teachers, the support staff who have very much brought this to my attention. And I would just want to raise, for the record, my sister works in early years, and she, every night when I go home from this place, is telling me about the importance of play. So I have no better counsel than her. But the pedagogies that are integrated into our education system will determine the long-term outcomes of a child's learning and development. It's only natural for a child to engage in explorative, creative and imaginative play when engaging with their language and also new concepts. It is play that helps a child to process their learning, reinforce its application and provide pleasure in the process. And of course, role play playing a vital role within that as well. It is when at play, a child will also learn their wider physical and social skills. They will be connecting the neural pathways in their brains, and they will be embedding principles deep in their minds. I'm happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, because many constituents in my constituency also contacted me about this very important debate. And as a mum of 3 children, I've seen myself just how important play is and how much it's helped them to understand teamwork and problem solving. And it's not just me that says that, but also UNICEF, who say how much it helps resilience, it reduces stress and supports emotional well-being. So does my honourable friend agree with me that there are so many ways that play could be integrated into the Key Stage 1 curriculum as part of education?
completely agree with the Honourable Member. She's really made the point so powerfully, not least through her own experience as well. And it is really important that we do embed this as a fundamental principle within the curriculum, because for far too long, play has been seen as a process of reward or enrichment, not a fundamental part of a child's learning. It is vital throughout childhood for this purpose. But to deny play as a core learning approach for improving reading, writing or maths is not to understand education, but to help a child find their own creativity will help them find themselves. Play-based learning is purposeful. Teachers have to prepare and really prepare when they are looking at integrating play into the work they do, setting the right environment, introducing the right medium, equipment, equipping the learning space, indoor and out, and integrating this with the interests of a child to optimise the environment to ensure that they really grasp the concepts which they are teaching. England, as we have heard, is such an outlier in this area, and that's why we have got to be on catch-up. And when I visited Car Infants, I saw the contribution play made to every part of the curriculum. When the school-centred learning on this, their outcomes improved. Burton Green School has created environments where children can explore and engage. And whether Oswaldwick or Aiken Primary or Westfield Community Schools, there's so many schools across York, they have totally embraced the evidence of the importance of play. But what I would say is, knowing the neuroscience, it very much does determine that play is central. My constituent, Charlotte Davis, also regularly reminds me of the real importance of motor and sensory integration so that the brain can be trained in such a way to help a child's ability to play. Often that is lost as children are forced against the right pathways to their education. We need to develop the right pedagogies and ensure that we are creating the physical opportunities, the mental opportunities to learning. And of course, as this government grapples with the opportunities around developing a proper SEND programme, we know this is important, but also if we're going to divert away from children just spending time on their screens, creative play integrated into learning will make a difference. My plea to government: follow the evidence, and when it comes to assessments and examinations, let's drop those SATs and ensure instead we've got a proper approach to education.
Sorry, I'm going to have to go down to 3.5 minutes. It is informal. Please don't, if we can stick to it, then I don't have to impose a formal time limit. Charlotte Kane.
Thank you, Ms Parker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I congratulate the petitioners for bringing this debate and the member for South Cotswold for her excellent speech introducing the debate. We've already heard some great speeches on the benefits of including play in Key Stage 1 education. We've a wealth of academic evidence on the subject, making a compelling case. For example, the finding that learning through play produces a 90% retention rate among children, compared to just 30% retention through reading and watching. Arguably, even more persuasively, we hear the testimonies of parents who stress just how vital play is in their children's lives and how important they feel it is that it's properly incorporated into their learning. I'd also like to add that play is fun, and children deserve to have fun in school, and hopefully it will help them like school, enjoy school, and learn better throughout their school life. Becky from my constituency is a parent of 2 young children and a teacher at Ely St John's Community Primary School. She contacted me recently to stress the importance of play-based learning in Key Stage 1. She wrote, "I'm confident that this approach is not only effective, but also essential for young children's learning and well-being, and has found already that the children are thriving and that feedback from parents has been very positive." But Becky also wrote of her disappointment that she thought hers was the only school in the area able to offer this approach to children. In her opinion, the pressure is coming from the curriculum and from Ofsted. As we've also heard, a further pressing concern is the government's strategy on SEND in the upcoming white paper. This is expected to call for greater inclusion in mainstream education. Yet part of the reason for the previous strain on local authorities dealing with SEND has been the lack of resources among mainstream schools already under pressure. As teachers like Becky recognise, without the necessary resources, Schools feel the pressure from Ofsted just to stick to the basics of the curriculum. We want our schools to be inclusive, recognising and accommodating the differences in how each child learns, and emphasising the importance of nurturing natural curiosity, creativity and critical thinking. Adopting a play-based learning approach in Key Stage 1 is crucial for this, giving each child the space to develop and engage with their education on their own terms. If the government is willing to listen to those who know this from experience, the school's white paper could truly be a turning point. If they are not, serious questions for the futures for our children, our schools, and proper provision of SEND support will remain. So can the Minister now provide details of how the government is engaging with experts, teachers and parents on play-based learning for Key Stage 1 children, and what consideration is being given for its inclusion in the upcoming schools white paper?
David Baines.
Thank you very much, Mrs Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Firstly, thank you to the member for South Cotswolds for introducing this debate so comprehensively. And I'd like to start by paying tribute to Ruth LeQuy and all those at the back of the room who've campaigned so hard to make this happen today. Right now in England, at the end of foundation stage, when they're just 5 years old, children, in Ruth's words, hit a policy cliff edge and practice becomes inconsistent. She says we need teacher-planned, curriculum-aligned, play-based learning and continuous provision in the classroom. It's how young children learn best, achieve best and build strong foundations. Chair, I agree with Ruth. I'm speaking today as a dad of 2 young boys who I know for sure would have benefited hugely from continuous provision in Key Stage 1. As a former teacher who is sure would have seen the benefits in my classroom. As the husband of a teaching assistant who knows this would help the children she supports. And first and foremost, as the MP for St Helens North, who is certain that this would help every single child in my constituency and across the country. We all need to be clear, I think, what this campaign is and isn't about. It isn't about the early years, it isn't about enrichment, it's not about extracurricular activity, and it most definitely isn't about lowering standards in any way. It is about bringing England into line with the rest of the UK and closer to other countries such as Finland and Singapore. It is about following the evidence. It is about doing what's best for all children, our schools and society as a result.
On that point, my honourable friend give way.
Of course.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. On the important point of evidence, one of my constituents, Julia, has been a teacher for over 20 years and wrote to me to share the benefits of play-based learning for children's cognitive, social and emotional development. Given the increasing prevalence of cognitive and language disorders in young children, it's really important we get this right. So does my honourable friend agree with me that when assessing the benefits of play-based learning, we should carefully consider the experience of teachers as well as all the academic evidence available?
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for making that point, and I completely agree with him. There's a huge body of evidence behind this, which I will touch upon again, and we need to follow the evidence, especially when it comes to something as important as our child's education. Sir Ken Robinson, who's someone I'm a big fan of, described play as a fantastically serious activity, and he was right. Now, some schools in England already have continuous provision throughout Key Stage 1, and they show that it works. You might wonder why we're therefore asking for it to be statutory if schools can already do it, and the answer is because every single child in every single school should be given access to the best possible education. It shouldn't be a postcode lottery. Also, we know that in high-pressure environments, which schools undoubtedly are, it's optional practice that gets squeezed first. Schools default to what feels safest for accountability and what feels familiar. Statutory expectation protects and encourages what works. Key Stage 1 is what Ruth LeQuy calls the missing middle. EYFS is protected in policy. Key Stage 2 is SATS-driven, but Key Stage 1 has the least protection for children's developmental needs. This is despite it being a vital stage in every child's life. There's a huge body of evidence which says that putting 5-year-olds in more formal classroom settings and removing continuous provision from the equation isn't in their best interest. So why do we do it? The good news is we don't have to. Government has an opportunity, and the timing couldn't be better with the curriculum and assessment review and the school's white paper coming forward. Chair, just to finish, I mentioned at the start that I'm a dad and I've got 2 children. My youngest is 9 today, and I'm missing his birthday party at home. Oh. I know.
Happy birthday to him.
Obviously, part of me wishes I was there, but I'm glad to be here because I can speak for him and his friends. Yeah. I know that the change we're debating here about a different approach in Key Stage 1 would have benefited my son massively, and his friends as well. It might be too late for them, but it's not for others. I've already raised this with ministers. I'm going to carry on making the point. I'd be grateful to the minister responding if she could commit to further meetings and discussions with herself and colleagues. It's our job to figure out how we prepare children for the mid-21st century. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we can be sure that we will not prepare our children for that future by doing what we've done in the past. This government has rightly said we want to give every child the best possible start in life, and learning through play until the age of 7 would absolutely help with that. Thank you to Ruth and all those who supported the campaign. They've got my support and you should have the support of everyone in this room.
Yeah.
Many happy returns to your son. James McMurdoch.
Thank you, Madam Barker. And also thank you to the Honourable Member for South Cotswolds in the opening speech, which was exceptional, detailed and very interesting, so I appreciate that. What I want to contribute very briefly to this debate is just the personal experiences that I've seen within my own constituency of South Basildon and East Thurrock, and what I've seen exceptionally well. And I've had the tremendous privilege of visiting several schools now, and I think we'll all agree that there are few things that warm the heart more than seeing happy children, particularly children that are learning in a safe and pleasant environment. But East Tilbury Primary School in particular, which has taken part in the outdoor play and learning programme, affectionately referred to as OPAL, has really stood out to me. Now, I'm proud to share this delightful school's achievement because they achieved the Platinum Award, which is the highest level in the programme and something only around 2% of schools nationally attain. OPAL now works with more than 2,000 schools, so this is no small achievement. While we do have many educators in the room, for those who are not quite so fond of mental arithmetics, that puts them in the top 40 out of 2,000, so that really is quite an achievement. What really struck me was not just the surprisingly natural equipment that they were using, trees for climbing, tyres, sand pits, wildlife areas and simple ball games, but what this really produced in the children, which was confidence, cooperation and joyfulness, genuine joyfulness. Now, I spent time observing them and playing and speaking with the staff, pupils, the OPAL representatives, and what was clear is that high quality play directly supports well-being, social development and readiness to learn, as has been already stated today with some very, very impressive statistics. Crucially, and I think this is where we all tie together and why we hopefully all agree that this is a win-win, this was not about lowering standards elsewhere or replacing learning with play. It was about using play intelligently to reinforce core skills, communication, resilience, problem solving, teamwork, and particularly within the early years. So as we've seen elsewhere across Europe, how that builds the foundation for more advanced learning as they go through the key stages. Importantly, East Tilbury's success was not driven by a top-down prescription, but by school leadership, staff commitment, and community buy-in. And that is a valuable lesson that I hope for us as policymakers, and I hope the Minister pays particular attention to at this point. So as we consider this petition, I would urge the government to focus less on rigid mandates and more on sharing best practice, supporting schools that want to innovate and trusting professionals to decide what works for their pupils. Done well, play is not a distraction from learning, it is a foundation for it, and East Tilbury Primary School is living proof of that. Thank you very much.
After the next speaker, there will be a formal time limit of 3 minutes. Serena Brackenbridge.
Mrs Barker, and thank you to the member for South Cotswold, to Ruth and all the campaigners that have turned out in good numbers for bringing this important debate to the House on play-based learning. Growing up as a child in today's world is difficult and it presents unique challenges for our brilliant early years sector. Too many children start school without the fundamental skills that they need, like being school ready, toilet trained, using a knife and fork, to focus, pay attention, concentrate, to develop speech and language, and the ability to play and form friendships. These are fundamental skills, and without them, far too many children struggle to thrive and flourish, and it can scar the rest of their school years. Early years should embrace how young children learn best. The move from the play-based early years foundation stage into the far more formal structure of Key Stage 1 can be abrupt for many. Play-based learning is statutory only up to the end of reception. Once children enter Key Stage 1, there is no requirement in the national curriculum to continue this approach, despite clear evidence that 5, 6 and 7-year-olds still learn best through exploration, collaboration and carefully planned play alongside direct teaching. This matters enormously in communities like mine in Wolverhampton and Willenhall, where schools are working hard to close early attainment gaps and support children facing disadvantage. While phonics and early attainment results are improving, too many children still arrive at school without the secure foundations that they need. If we are to tackle lifelong barriers, we must get those early years of formal schooling right. And that's why I welcome the government's actions under the leadership of Secretary of State Bridget Phillipson, because significant steps have been made in the right direction to better support early years childcare and education, the rollout of Best Start hubs, family first partnerships, but we've got to focus better on school readiness and supporting early speech and language development and further strengthening early years provision. The government is taking practical steps to ensure that the children are equipped with the skills that they need. But initiatives to improve phonics, early literacy and teacher training does reflect a clear commitment to building solid foundations for all children. But we must recognise the importance of play and holistic development. Play is not just nice to have, it's a foundation of language and literacy development, as the National Literacy Trust has highlighted. High quality play is especially vital for disadvantaged children, helping to close early language gaps and give every child the tools to thrive. But simply put, play is the rocket fuel of learning. So I will support the children's health and well-being and urge the government to listen to parents and early years professionals to take meaningful steps to embed play and continuous provision within the Key Stage 1 statutory framework.
This formal time limit, Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Ms Barker. Play is firmly back on the agenda in this Parliament, and it's symbolised by the new APPG on play. And last week on Wednesday, we heard from Ruth Lee Cui, my mummy teacher, among others, about the importance of this petition. In England, we rightly pride ourselves on an early years foundation stage that places play-based pedagogy at the heart of learning. But for children, that approach ends abruptly at the school gate of year 1. Rachel Peck, a constituent and Key Stage 1 teacher and early years practitioner, says the need for play doesn't suddenly disappear at 5. Removing play so early removes the very opportunities children need to develop creativity, collaboration, problem solving and communication. And my constituent Louise Jane tells me that children in Key Stage 1 are still so young. Sometimes it feels like the system sees them as numbers and data when they are so much more than that. We know that active play stimulates the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports memory, focus and neuroplasticity. Put simply, we know that movement helps the brain grow. And we know that through play, we have challenge and risk so that children develop self-regulation, emotional resilience and the ability to manage stress, essential social skills that cannot be taught by sitting down and from a worksheet. My constituent Rachel Peck says we spend the rest of children's school lives trying to teach skills that should have been naturally developed through play alongside their peers, and I agree. Yet, when children enter Key Stage 1, we find that play becomes a reward and its withdrawal a sanction, without realising that it's often the absence of movement and play that drives the behaviours that then get punished. My constituent Kate Bethune, who I met at one of my surgeries, told me we are crushing children's natural creativity and curiosity because we are obsessed with compliance and early testing. Many children are simply not developmentally ready to sit still and write for long periods. So what do we need? We need to make play-based pedagogy and continuous provision statutory in Key Stage 1, creating a national expectation that's clear that play is a developmental need, not an enrichment activity. And here I want to thank Veronica Woodward of St Walburgers, Leanne Dixon from Stourfield Juniors, Pauline Sweetman from Stourfield Infants, Vanessa Webster from Epiphany, and Michelle Dyer and Imogen Bull from Avonbourne, and Chris Jackson from Avonwood. And Chris hosted those last Friday in one of my SEN roundtables to hear from teachers and head teachers about what the future reform should look like. And they were convinced that play-based pedagogy is critical for supporting children's well-being and trying to address some of the issues that occur in later life. Just this morning, I was at St James's School, and I spoke with the head teacher, Mr Brown, and the assistant head, who's also a Key Stage 1 teacher, Mr Parsons, and they too agree. So, we're in a rare reform window. Decisions being made now on curriculum and assessment will shape classrooms for years, and with them children's confidence, well-being and attainment. This is not about choosing play over learning. This is about choosing play because it is learning.
Hear, hear.
Amanda Hack.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I thank the member for South Cotswolds for introducing this really important debate. I know how important this is for my constituency in North West Leicestershire, from the children, from the head teachers and from parents that I've spoken to. Play should not be seen as an enrichment activity. Play just helps us to learn. The greatest breakthrough in scientific endeavour, including Einstein's theory of relativity, came as a result from being able to think creatively. Physical expressions such as dance, creating music and making up stories are not childish things to do. There's evidence, for example, that listening to music enables children to engage with patterns and sequencing, which are fundamental to the basics of maths. One of the best parts of this job is going and visiting my schools. And Worthington Primary School in my constituency has rolled out a free breakfast club. But actually it wasn't the breakfast that was fascinating. It was the fact that kids were sitting around just playing with Lego. They were just expressing themselves without needing to conform. And the head teacher was saying that that is improving overall behaviour in their classrooms because they're so much more relaxed going into formal lessons. One of my district councillors is a former GP. And a psychotherapist shared this with me. I was sitting in a primary school class as a governor some years ago. The topic was materials and how they change. The teacher was using ice and water and melted and chilled chocolate to explain the topic. All was really good. The kids were engaged. In the corner of the classroom, the hen's eggs had hatched. The child wanted to talk about the exciting change in that material, a little hatchling. And she was sorry to see that it wasn't allowed because it wasn't in the lesson plan. The campaign for play-based learning isn't about increasing playtime. It's about ensuring that learning is delivered in a way that aligns with how children grow, develop, think, and ask questions, just as how the egg had hatched and why the others hadn't yet. Actually, one of our earliest memories as a parent is visiting a science museum, and the hatchery needed to be visited several times a day. The excitement increased the more and more as the day continued. Children will direct you in how they want to learn. We have to give them that opportunity to express themselves. Mm-hmm. Learning through play isn't a new idea, but we've just been rolling back on the importance of it. We know we're now at the outlier in the UK. Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland already have embedded play-based approaches to their curriculum at an early school level. We are falling behind and letting our children down. What's going to be really important is how we value play by recognising it in the curriculum. It would be useful to hear from the Minister on that point specifically, considering that play is not an added extra. It's an important part of component learning for our children.
Chris Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Mrs Barker. It's an honour to serve with you in the chair, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for South Cotswolds for an excellent opening speech, although I will say that the productive struggle she referred to sounded rather like a slogan from my trade union days. I wholeheartedly support this petition, and I thank all the campaigners behind it for ensuring that we are debating this important subject today. I've heard from so many parents across North East Hertfordshire that overly formal academic approaches do not suit their children, and our whole society is missing out on the vast, untapped potential of children who are never going to thrive in a sedentary environment. The valorisation of this model and the expectation that all children can be measured against it teaches many from the youngest age that learning is a struggle to be resented, not an exploration to be enjoyed. And politicians so often speak about the importance of education equipping children with skills that businesses require, but frankly, Chair, I think it is a lot more important that 5-, 6- and 7-year-old kids are happy and healthy. Fortunately, we do not need to choose between education that is fun and inclusive and one that equips pupils with essential knowledge and skills, as has been so powerfully proven by Unplugged Tots, run by my brilliant constituent Hannah. Unplugged Tots supports children to be the problem solvers, inventors, engineers, scientists and technologists of tomorrow by equipping them with the skills they'll need through accessible, fun, engaging activities that are screen-free. Hannah is proving that we can teach children as young as 2.5 the foundational skills and critical thinking abilities for coding through play and without any screen whatsoever. It is a genuinely inspiring model that I hope the Minister will look at closely and which could benefit schools across the country. Chair, I will give the final word to Hannah, who says, and I quote, "Today's children are tomorrow's future, and equipping them for this rapidly changing future is essential. If we want to build capable citizens for tomorrow, we must take play in Key Stage 1 seriously. Play supports the whole child, providing an equitable starting point for all children, regardless of background. When play is integral to the curriculum, we raise standards by nurturing confident learners for a rapidly changing world, equipped with a lifelong love of learning." Thank you.
Craft.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. And I'd like to extend my congratulations as well to the campaigners for securing this debate today, particularly the 442 members of my constituency who signed the petition in Thurrock. Play-based learning, as many members have pointed out, is not about lowering attainment or lowering standards. Indeed, in countries such as Finland, Norway, Sweden, Japan, New Zealand, that prioritise learning through play, all consistently score highly in international rankings. And again, their attainment levels at 16 and beyond echo this, not just in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Play-based learning, I will just briefly touch on, has the ability to be truly inclusive learning. And in the government's upcoming white paper, I understand that looking at an inclusive schooling model is something that is being very strongly considered. And a way of actually really achieving this at Key Stage 1 is by incorporating play-based learning. One thing that play-based learning does do is support early language development. The charity Speech and Language UK estimates that there's around 2 million children with a speech and language challenge in the UK currently, and whose needs are not always being met. About 30% of children with an SEND need have speech and language difficulties as their primary cause of having an SEND need. The ability of play-based learning allows for children with a speech and language challenge to take time to really come to grips with it, to support their speech and language learning, to allow them to develop these skills that will be absolutely crucial to them as they continue their journey through education and then into employment and throughout their life. It have a real opportunity to turn things around for these children in particular. And one thing that play-based learning does do, if we're looking at inclusive schools, it says who we really want to see in the classroom. Who are classrooms for? They're not just for children that can sit still and be rigidly listening to lessons by rote. They are for all children. They are for all young minds. It encourages curiosity. It encourages creativity. And therefore, it sends a signal to all children that they are welcome in our classrooms and welcome in our schools, and that however they are based in learning, they will be supported. So I will just join with many members here today who have made really powerful statements about why this form of learning should be adopted, and urge the government to use this moment that we have when we are looking at how our education system can best deliver for children, for families and for our society, to really grasp the nettle here and to embed play as learning in Key Stage 1.
Lib Dem spokesperson, Caroline Voden.
Thank you, Ms Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chair, and I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for South Cotswolds, for opening this debate with such a well-argued and passionate speech that really goes to the heart of this debate. And I'd also like to commend Ruth Luqui and all the petitioners for raising this issue, and the 106,082 people who signed it. And I would also like to wish a happy birthday to the son of the Honourable Member for St Helens North. So what is play for? What benefits can it bring to children? And why is it more important than ever that we enable children to learn through play, both inside the classroom and out? But most importantly, perhaps, why should educational play stop at age 5 in England? Anyone who has spent time watching children playing can see that they are learning all the time, their young brains puzzling over how to do something, collaborating with friends, finding solutions to whatever the challenge is that they've set themselves, building resilience and learning the art of perseverance.
As someone who has recently welcomed a grandchild into the family, the algorithm has found me, and I now regularly see posts about Montessori play on my feeds. Brilliant ideas for simple activities that young children can engage in, which are fun, absorbing, and which teach them crucial skills that they will carry with them as they grow. But the best bit about it is children don't know they're learning. They're not being told to sit down or be quiet or work at a set pace. They're enjoying themselves, going at their own speed, working things out as they go, and quietly developing their little brains as they play. We often say in this place that high-quality education is the best possible investment we can make in the future of our country. And as the bedrock of everything that follows, the early years are crucially important, laying that foundation stone for learning, well-being and opportunity. From age 4 to 7, significant socio-emotional and physical changes are taking place. For example, at 4 years old, children start to expand their vocabulary to express their needs through words rather than actions. At 5, they start to develop empathy for others, and at 6, they begin to experience multiple emotions simultaneously. These are crucial and long-standing developments which shape a child's character for life. So it's vitally important that during these formative years, children have access to the most appropriate learning methods that nurture their curiosity, their creativity, their critical thinking, the skills that will help them thrive as adults. Evidence suggests that play-based learning can have a positive impact during this period of a child's life on communication, emotional and physical development. But being outside, getting wet and muddy, sliding around, climbing over things and exploring their world is just as important as sitting inside, playing with building bricks or doing puzzles. Children develop their knowledge and skills in the most meaningful way by doing things that they want to do. The Lego Play Well report, based on nearly 13,000 responses from parents and children, found that 83% of children say they learn better when it feels like play. Through play, children have the space and time to make connections in their learning, to try things out, to make mistakes, and to learn how to do better next time. And honourable members across the House have shared personal experiences, input from teachers, and academic evidence that all show the importance of learning through play. Parents in this country recognise that play helps build the skills that lead to academic success, but also how important play is to foster creative, sociable, emotionally resilient adults. Critics of play in the classroom often have the misconception that play is only unstructured fun, noisy children mindlessly running around like headless chickens without a care in the world. But as my honourable friend, the member for the South Cotswolds, laid out, this is not what we're talking about today, as important as it is. Guided play within the classroom gives children the opportunity to learn and develop in a no-pressure environment, approaching tasks at their own pace in their own way. The 2023 Ofsted report, International Perspectives on Early Years, agrees with this, highlighting how teaching and play are difficult to separate, with adults likely to be teaching children during play, whether that be free or guided, either unconsciously or consciously. And other countries have play embedded in their curriculum. For example, in Sweden, the curriculum guidance explicitly states that both free and guided play should be a part of education, and a child has the right to both these types of play. In Finland, school doesn't start until age 7, but high-quality early years education is widely available and affordable. Finnish early years programmes focus on children's holistic development with an emphasis on play as the primary mode of learning, where teachers act as guides for the child's exploration. But we don't just need to look overseas for inspiration, we can also look at alternative approaches to education here. I recently visited a school in my constituency which follows the play-based Steiner-Waldorf education system. And this is an approach that focuses on holistic development through self-directed, imaginative play, fostering creativity, social skills and nature connection before age 7. Children are encouraged to engage in uninterrupted free play, nurturing their creativity and allowing them to form and then express their own experiences. Teachers function centrally as role models, teaching not through instruction, but through action, which children can then imitate. Crucially, the Steiner approach includes significant amounts of time spent outdoors, regardless of the weather, to ensure children connect with nature, improving their physical health and providing them with wonderful educational opportunities. And it also helps build that deep connection with nature that we are going to need for future generations to care about and promote the protection of our natural world. And I'd just briefly like to commend all the schools of South Devon that prioritise Forest School as a way of teaching and nurturing children so well through outdoor play. I'm convinced that there are aspects of the Steiner style of teaching that should be considered more seriously by our mainstream education system, especially for little children in their formative years. It may be dismissed by many as weird hippie nonsense, but it is much more serious than that. Let's keep an open mind when approaching how we best educate children during this crucial period of their lives. The Liberal Democrats believe in broad, balanced, forward-looking early years education that prepares students to excel both in school and outside the classroom. Play-based education must be a part of that and should not stop at 5 years old. I'd argue that playing is important throughout life, though it might change somewhat as the years progress. As this petition highlights, the government acknowledges the importance of the role of play in achieving this in their own early years foundation stage statutory framework. This framework details how play is essential for children's development, building their confidence as they learn to explore, relate to others, set their own goals and solve problems. Children learn by leading their own play and by taking part in play and learning that is guided by adults. But a child's fundamental development does not stop when they leave reception. So why does the government think that play is only important up until you turn 5? And why is it that England is lagging behind the other nations of the UK? To address these inconsistencies, the Liberal Democrats are calling on the government to explore how play-based learning could be effectively implemented within the Key Stage 1 curriculum in England, including through consultation with teachers and schools. And this is not about enrichment, this is about play-structured learning in the classroom. I hope the government will take a good hard look at how play could best be incorporated into our curriculum, given the extensive benefits it can provide, as honourable members have laid out so eloquently today. Thank you.
Opposition spokesperson, Saqib Bhatti.
Thank you, Ms Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and to take part in this debate on play in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. And firstly, I'd like to open by thanking the 106,082 signatories of this petition, including the 200 signatories from my own constituency of Meriden and Solihull East. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for South Cotswold for her opening remarks. And may I also wish the son of the member for St Helens a very happy birthday on behalf of His Majesty's official opposition. I'm sure that is all he ever wanted. In addition, I'd like to praise all contributions from all members. It was a thoughtful debate which covered a whole array. And while we may not agree on all aspects of the debate, I found it very fruitful to consider the different points of view. In particular, I'd like to commend my honourable friend for South West Devon, who made an excellent contribution, highlighting the need for consistency and questioning the Minister on that. And I echo that question. Having heard members at length today, it's quite clear that we all accept that play has an important role in children's cognitive and social development, particularly in their early years. There is strong evidence to suggest play is an important factor in a child's development. It teaches young people resilience, problem solving, social skills, enhances cognitive development, and so much more. Indeed, Dr. David Whitebread from the University of Cambridge argues that play, in all its rich variety, is one of the highest achievements of the human species, alongside language, culture, and technology. Indeed, without play, none of these other achievements would be possible. That's why the early years foundation stage statutory framework includes play in delivering learning and development, and why the official opposition supports this framework, setting out this responsibility for the early years education providers. And as a father of 2 young children myself, I recognise the importance of play, and I know that Key Stage 1 is a crucial time in a child's learning and development, with children set up for the future academic success based on the foundation of knowledge and learning skills that they receive when they first start school. It is thanks to the knowledge-rich curriculum underpinned by phonics, introduced by the last government under the excellent leadership of Lord Gove and Sir Nick Gibb, that primary school children in England are now the best readers in the Western world, with 80% of 6-year-olds now reaching the expected reading standard compared to only 58% in 2012. Millions and more children are in good or outstanding schools and that have had tougher exams, better teaching standards, a rigorous curriculum and thousands of new academies. And I say that because having heard the debate, I think that it's important to know what we're discussing here today. While play should certainly be part of that delivery, we believe that it is schools who are best placed to decide how this curriculum is delivered to their pupils. And it's important that precious time in the classroom is not missed out on. Now, I know a lot of members have pointed out that that is not what they're talking about, but there has to be clarity in terms of how play is then delivered. Because we are, of course, as we all agree, preparing our children for the future. That desire for freedom is why the officials' opposition strongly oppose parts of the government's Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill that restricts academy freedoms and seeks to impose a one-size-fits-all approach on our education system. And I'd like to ask the Minister why the Education Secretary thinks that centralising decision-making in Whitehall is more effective than empowering those school leaders. The transfer of power from head teachers to unelected officials at the department will be deeply damaging in our view for children and will see our children's education suffer as a result. And it's not just the Conservatives who believe this, because it was Sir Tony Blair whose government championed the initial academisation of schools, and who I know have great concern about this, because this is a reversal of 30 years of consensus around academic achievement and development. While we also welcome the curriculum review, I do have worries because while it was a relief that the government chose not to follow the example of their counterparts in Labour-run Wales by dropping phonics from the curriculum, if everything is a priority, as we post at the dispatch box, nothing is then a priority. If government wants more play, then it needs to be clear what part of the curriculum which has to be pushed to the side or will standards suffer as a result. And I'm absolutely clear that if the government truly wants to give children the freedom to learn and grow through play, they should confirm that they are committed to ensuring that those core skills of reading, writing and numeracy that children need to succeed will be part of this. And if more play is needed for children, then there is another way of achieving this in our view. And that's where I'd like to just talk about the use of screens by children. Because according to Ofcom, 25% of children aged 5...
Order. Can I just bring the Shadow Minister just back to the issue of play, please?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chairman. And the point I was going to make was actually, in the use of social media, for example, it will free up more time for play. And that's why it's really, really important, because we all want to achieve the same things, which is more resilience and more capability. So hopefully the Minister can confirm whether the use of screens at such a younger age, they agree with us that it can have a detrimental effect, and whether they will progress with some of the evidence. Because I accept that many parents, Madam Chairman, are simply trying to do their best, and they want their children to have the best opportunities for their children. And so that's why I would implore the government to take a deep, hard look at the official opposition's approach to the use of screens and social media and the use of phones in school as well, Madam Chairman, which we've also called on being banned officially to allow for greater standards in school, because we are worried about the fact that children now spend more time online. And in fact, just last week I was reading about reports that some young people try to swipe on books because they use digital devices and even tap those books like phones. Of course.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. This being a debate about whether play ought to be a mandatory part of Key Stage 1, is it the position of the official opposition that they support that?
Well, I made that very clear. We support the education statutory framework as it is, but I also think the questions around social media and the use of phones are really pertinent, and that's what parents are certainly writing to us as Members of Parliament, as I'm sure it is. Okay.
Shadow Minister, to bring it back to the petition in hand, please.
Madam Chairman, I therefore thank all the contributors of this debate and the signers of the petition for their contribution to this. We recognise the importance of play, and that's why we challenge the government to give further clarity on the development of the curriculum review as to see what will be part in terms of if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. So then in that case, what will be part of that debate going forward? And I also challenge the government to give a bit more clarity about freedom for schools, as was posed by my honourable friend from South yesterday.
Thank you, Mrs Barker. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, and I thank all honourable members for attending and contributing to this important debate today, and to all of those who have signed and engaged with the petition, and in particular those here today to listen to the debate. I know from conversations with my honourable friend, the Minister for School Standards, who has responsibility for this area but was unfortunately unable to be here today due to a prior commitment, that this is a subject that has drawn much attention and support from many of your constituents. Mrs Barker, my primary goal as an Education Minister is to give every single child the best possible start in life. And I've had the pleasure of visiting primary schools and early years providers across the country, including many wonderful in my own constituency of Reading West and Mid-Berkshire, such as Thiel, Church of England Primary and Calcott Primary and Junior School, who are in fact coming to Parliament
later this week. And it's been clear on all of my visits how important play is to younger children's well-being and development. Some of my best days in my job as Minister for Early Education have included being attacked by plastic dinosaurs and racking up my dry cleaning bill in muddy outdoor play areas. And it's been a privilege to listen to all of your thoughtful contributions and hear about all of the excellent work being done in your constituencies. The member for South Cotswolds started us off wonderfully, I think, reminding us about the best sound in the world being the sound of children playing at break time and lunchtime, and I agree with her wholeheartedly. And she also drew on an important theme throughout the rest of the debate, which is the distinction between play-based learning and enrichment, and the government does absolutely accept that distinction. My friend, the member for Hastings and Rye, has been running a fantastic campaign in her constituency against the closure of playgrounds, and this is something which the government is really determined to do something about with our £18 million committed in the budget on this very issue, and other members, including the member for Dulwich and West Norwood, touched on this issue. We've had fantastic contributions during the debate from members from Bournemouth East, Thurrock, South Basildon and East Thurrock, and the member for St Helens North on the importance of play. And I've really enjoyed listening to those contributions. And I, of course, would like to add my birthday wishes to my friend, the Honourable Member for St Helens North's son. I hope he gets a good chance to have a good play with his new toys. There's also been really important contributions, Mrs Barker, on play and screen time, as well as school readiness, from member from North East Hertfordshire, York Central and Wolverhampton North East. And I would just say the government is really determined on the question of ensuring that screens are not displacing play, that we are going to be bringing forward the first ever screen time guidance in the early years for parents, taking really tough action to ensure that there is no phones in any of our schools, so that we cannot be disrupting children from play or learning, and ensuring that we're working with parents and families to find that right balance so children are doing what they should be doing and playing when they're at school or in nursery. The member for Thurrock also touched on the importance of play on early language development, something which I think is really important and very much a part of our plans for school readiness, as this government strives to ensure record numbers of children are ready for school. And of course, my friend, the member for Dulwich and West Norwood, also remembered the great Frank Dobson, a huge advocate for play, and I thank her for bringing his memory to this debate today. Mrs Barker, England's early years foundation stage framework recognises the importance of play, setting out that play both indoors and outdoors is essential for children's development, including areas such as physical development and communication and language. And I agree with colleagues here today that the impact of play on their development and well-being does not stop when children reach school age. We will support schools to decide how best to support children's transitions from the early years foundation stage into key stage 1, and some schools do continue elements of the pedagogical approach of the EYFS, including play, into year 1 to enable a gradual transition. But ultimately, Mrs Barker, we do believe that teachers are best placed to apply their professional judgment and creativity to meet the needs of pupils in this area. It's important that teachers have the flexibility to adapt their approach to best support each pupil to obtain the knowledge, skills and understanding that they should acquire during their education. This is a principle that we re-emphasised in our response to the Curriculum and Assessment Review last November, and it is why it would be not right for us to legislate, in our view, to make play and continuous provision statutory in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. That does not for a second mean that we expect children in Year 1 to spend all day and every day sat inside, and it certainly doesn't mean that play is no longer on the agenda. As a government, we've committed £18 million to upgrade 200 playgrounds across the country. We're amending the NPPF to protect play spaces, and my colleagues in the Health Department have published the first national guidance on commissioning and delivering health play services. And in education, we're also acting to provide children with opportunities outside of the classroom. And I do recognise the important distinction that colleagues have made during this debate, but of course enrichment is also important in our schools. And we will set out a new core enrichment offer that every school and college should provide for every pupil, which delivers access to civic engagement, arts and culture, nature, outdoor and adventure, sport and physical activities, and developing wider life skills. Mrs Barker, our free breakfast clubs are also a brilliant opportunity for schools to incorporate more play into each day, offering 30 minutes in the morning where children can explore a range of activities in a supportive and calm environment, whether that's kicking a football around or building a Lego masterpiece. I've seen across the country breakfast clubs where schools are using this Labour government's investment to help children explore their imagination and creativity. And of course, breakfast clubs also help to drive improvements in behaviour, attendance and attainment, and provide families with more affordable childcare choices. I also want to briefly mention our curriculum reforms. This government recognises that our children are stepping into a world of huge opportunity, but also an immense change and challenge. And we want our new national curriculum to arm them to thrive, building skills that have been spoken about in today's debate, such as communication, creativity, and social and emotional skills, which can be developed through play and a wide range of enrichment activities. Chair, Mrs Barker, in conclusion, this is a government that is serious about the importance of play in childhood and across government departments. We're investing in the infrastructure of play and a transformed early years system. While we don't agree with the specific suggestion before us today that play in continuous provision should be mandated as a part of the national curriculum at Key Stage 1, we do trust teachers to make the best choices for their students, and we do thank everybody for coming today and for their thoughtful. You've got me right at the end. But my friend, the member for York.
I'm really grateful for the Minister giving way. Would she go back to the department and ask them to engross themselves in the evidence, because the evidence is overwhelming the importance of the integration of play with learning, and to ensure that we take an evidence-based approach to policy making?
I thank her for her last-minute intervention, and I can reassure her that we are absolutely immersed and engrossed in the evidence in the department, and our view is that play can be a very important way of helping children to learn. We don't think it's right to mandate it at Key Stage 1 because we think it's important for teachers to have that flexibility themselves. But as she rightly knows, and her sister knows, being a fantastic superhero working in early years, that it is embedded as part of the EYFS curriculum. Mrs Barker, I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Dr Roz Savage to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the amazing petitioners and also to all the colleagues who have contributed to this important debate. I would like to echo the request to the Minister to go back to the department to reconsider this. I feel really passionate about this. I have spoken with many educators over the last few weeks in preparation for this debate, and they have educated me, deeply impressing on me the absolutely critical value of play within the curriculum as a pedagogical method. Wales and Scotland are already aware of this, as are many countries in Scandinavia, and the evidence would suggest that they are raising children who are happier, more engaged in their lessons, who are doing extremely well. And this feels a critical moment for this, with AI so high on the political agenda, that we really do need to be nurturing those skills of creativity, of confidence, of imagination, all of those essentially human things that AI cannot do. The Minister spoke about giving teachers the flexibility to bring this in if they think it is appropriate. Play should not be a postcode lottery. This should be absolutely a right for children in schools across the entire country. So I do urge and beseech the Minister to please take the passionate requests from Westminster Hall back to the department. Yes, I will.
I'm very grateful for you giving way at this last moment. And if I could just ask you directly if you agree with me that these debates are called debates for a reason, and where there is an overwhelming outcome in one way or the other, we do expect the Minister, regardless of who that is or what party they're a part of, to take that away and implement it quite directly and quite heavily wherever possible and wherever appropriate. So would the member agree with me that these are debates where we expect relevant outcomes, not just an exercise in hearing our own voices?
I thank the honourable gentleman for making that point, for reiterating the point, and I hope that I speak for the entire room when I just one final time urge the Minister to convey this message. Thank you very much.
Hear, hear. Question is that this House has considered E-petition 729440 relating to play in the Key Stage 1 curriculum. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is until 6 p.m.